Hello everyone, so our topic is about environmental crisis and sustainable development. Environmental crisis, it changes to the environment of a species or population destabilizes its continued survival. But before we jump into our topic, let's have a short recap by let me narrate to you a sort of a story about the environmental problems that we are facing right now. Okay, so let's start. So if you live in metropolitan Manila, it is the capital city of the Philippines and it is also a highly urbanized city. So if you live in metropolitan Manila and you travel to school or to work every day, so the moment you step out of your home, you are already exposed to the most serious problem humanity faces today. It is the deteriorating state of the environment. And then the moment you step out of your gate, the fetid smell of uncollected garbages welcomed you. And then you see a rotting vegetable, a dead rat, and plastics. Here are the ways that already indicative to some environmental problems. Rotting vegetables must ought to be added or put into the compost pile or the compost pit. A dead rat must either be buried or burnt. And then plastics must be washed and recycled because unlike with these two ways, plastics cannot be decomposed. Hop to the first bus as it approaches to the famous Epifanio de los Santos Avenue, or what we call as the EDSA. It is where the traffic slows down considerably, and it is the normal Manila morning traffic. So as you look to the window, you see the smoke coming out from the diesel vehicles. And as you lift up your head to the sky, you see nothing but smog, courtesy of the cars and the buses, and as well as the coal plant and the several industrial sites that are located alongside with the Pasig River. And you notice the oil spots on the river. And there are also influents that are floating alongside each other. Where you live in, there is a dying river, an increasingly poisonous sky, and an enormous amount of waste, and also a declining quality of life. And it was at this point that you recognize the ecological crisis happening around you, and how the deterioration of the environment has destabilized populations and species, rising the specter of extinction for some, and a lesser quality of life for the survivors and their offspring. Okay, so now let's proceed to the world's leading environmental problems. So these are the environmental challenges that the world faces today. First, the depredation caused by industrial and transportation toxins and plastic in the ground, and the defiling of the sea, the rivers, the waterbeds by oil spills and the acid rain, to the dumping of urban waste. So as you can see here in the picture, there are waste that are being scattered by the sea or in the rivers, and then here we have the oil spills. Like it is, people here are cleaning the oil spills in the rivers, in the sea, or even the ocean. We have the changes in global weather patterns, flash floods, snowstorms, and the spread of deserts, and the surge in extreme ocean and land temperatures leading to the rise in the sea levels. So as the polar ice caps melts because of the weather, plus the flooding of many lowland areas across the world. Yes, here in the picture, as you can see, there is an increasing of the sea levels here. Third one, we have overpopulation. Why is overpopulation be part of the environmental challenge? It is because Overpopulation is associated with negative environmental and economic outcomes, ranging from the impacts of overfarming, deforestation, and water pollution to eutrophication and global warming. So the fourth one is the exhaustion of the world's natural non-renewable resources, from oil reserves to minerals to potable water. So the depletion of natural resources occurs when resources are consumed at a faster rate than that of replacement. So natural resources are those resources that are in existence without human actions, and they can either be renewable or non-renewable. Okay, so the fifth one, we have a waste disposal catastrophe due to the excessive amount of waste. It can either be from plastic to food packages or to electronic waste that are being unloaded by the communities in the landfills, as well as on the ocean, and the dumping of nuclear waste. Here's a picture that waste are being dumped, and as you can see, waste are being put together. So it contains a lot of chemicals. Some waste are toxic that could harm the people, the animals, and the plants, because these some of the waste here are a byproduct of the manufacturers, farming, water treatment systems, construction, automotive garages, laboratories, hospitals, and other industries. It can either be liquid, solid, or sludge that contain chemicals. So these waste can harm the people, the animals, and the plants, whether it ends up on the ground, so in streams or even in the air. So some toxins such as mercury and lead persist to the environment for many years and accumulate over time. So humans or wildlife often observe these toxic substances when they eat fish or other prey. So it is really important to look after our environment and to segregate our waste accordingly. So the sixth one is the destruction of million-year-old ecosystems and the loss of biodiversity, destruction of the coral reefs, and massive deforestation that had led to the extinction of particular species and the decline in the number of others. So there is a danger that losses of biodiversity resulting from one's activity could reduce the resilience of ecosystems to withstand climatic variations and air pollution damage. Atmospheric changes can affect the forest, the biodiversity, freshwater and marine ecosystems, the coral reefs, and the economic activities such as agriculture. 7 is the reduction of oxygen and the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because of deforestation, resulting in the rise in ocean acidity by as much as 150% in the last 250 years. So here, as you can see, this is the result of deforestation, man-made. We are abusing our environment by cutting out trees, and that resulted us humans experiencing the reduction of oxygen. We have the depletion of the ozone layer protecting the planet from the sun's deadly ultraviolet rays due to the chlorofluorocarbons in the atmosphere. We all know that ozone layer is the one protecting the planet that absorbs almost all of the sun's harmful ultraviolet light. So ozone depletion occurs when the chlorofluorocarbons and Holland's gases formerly found in aerosol spray cans and refrigerants are released into the atmosphere. Nine is the deadly acid rain as a result of fossil fuel combustion toxic chemicals from erupting volcanoes, and the massive rotting vegetables filling up garbage dumps or left on the streets. So as I've said a while ago, rotting vegetables must be placed or must be added to the compost pile or the compost pit because they can easily be decomposed. And the acid rain can do immense harm, particularly to the forest areas, because acid rain contains poison and acids that could harm the people, the plants, and the animals. And also there are chemicals that can be released by the magma during the eruption of volcanoes. We have the water pollution arising from the industrial and community waste residues seeping into underground water tables, rivers, and seas. So from big pieces of garbage to invisible chemicals, a wide range of pollutants end up in our planet's lakes, rivers, streams, groundwater, and eventually to the oceans. Because these water are waste coming out from the industrial and the other community that contains chemicals, and then it would eventually affect us humans and the animals and all the living things. It threatens the source we rely on for drinking water and the other critical needs. Even though our planet Earth contains 70% water, but there are only 2.5% is fresh, and the other 1% is coming out from the glaciers and the snowfields. So we must take care of it and learn to value it. So we must not just put out waste onto the water. The urban sprawls that continue to expand as a city turns into megalopolis, destroying farmlands, increasing traffic gridlock, and making smog cloud permanent urban fixture. Okay, so let me take Manila as an example. As I've said a while ago, Manila is a highly urbanized city. It contains big establishments. So as you can see, it then turned out to have a traffic, particularly in EDSA. So those vehicles, so the smoke coming out from the vehicles, it contains chemicals that could damage our ozone layer, and then that make a smog cloud permanent urban fixture. So we must not just destroy our environment, because it will result to the loss of biodiversity. And I just hope that we must take care of our environment and learn to prioritize it. 12 is pandemic and other threats to public health arising from the waste mixing with drinking water, polluted environments that became breeding grounds for mosquitoes and disease-carrying rodents and pollution. Of course, with the situation that we are in, COVID-19 pandemic has become a threat to everyone. 13. A radical alteration of food systems because of genetic modifications in food. Here in the picture, it portrays the alteration of our food systems. We have observed that some of the apples are being coated with wax, and then there are also tomatoes that are being injected with chemicals to make it look bigger. So our food are being contaminated with chemicals that will eventually harm us humans and animals and other living things. Many of these problems are caused by natural changes. Volcanic eruptions release toxins in the atmosphere and lower world temperature. So the U.S. Geological Survey measured gas emissions from the active Kilauea volcano in Hawaii and concluded that This volcano has been releasing more than twice the amount of noxious sulfur dioxide gas as a single 30th power plant in the United States mainland. Because sulfur dioxide gas could harm the humans because it affects the respiratory system, particularly our lung. So it can also irritate the eyes, and it irritates the respiratory tract system and increases the risk of tract infections. So it causes coughing, mucus secretion, and aggravates conditions such as asthma and chronic bronchitis. 15 million of sulfur dioxide that were released when Mount Pinatubo erupted on June 15, 2001 created a hazy layer of aerosol particles composed primarily of sulfuric acid droplets that brought down average global temperature by 0.6 degrees Celsius for the next months. So this hazy layer aerosol particles that are being released by the volcano, they scatter and absorb incoming sunlight. Aerosol particles exert a cooling effect on the Earth's surface. Volcanoes at the University of Hawaii added that Pinatubo had released 15 to 20 megaton of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere to offset the present global warming trends to severely impact the ozone budget. So it really did an impact to global warming. And I added some informations, and these are the reference. And that's it. I'm Zaraga del Rosanegro, and those are my parts. So thank you for listening.
Man-made pollution. Man-made pollutants can threaten human health and compromise the natural ecosystem and environment. Man-made pollution is generally a byproduct of human actions such as consumption, waste disposal, industrial production, transportation, and energy generation. Pollutants can enter the surrounding environment in various ways, either through the atmosphere, water systems, or soil, and can persist for generations if left untreated. Most polluted cities in the world. Saudi Arabia's sandstorms combined with combustion exhaust from traffic and industrial waste has led World Health Organization to declare Riyadh as one of the most polluted cities in the world. Coal fumes from factories and settling down in nearby areas poison 20% of China's soil with heavy metals from the mines discovered in rice fields in Hunan and Zhejiang, damaging the food supply. Greenpeace India claimed that the country's air pollution was at its worst in 2015, caused by the weak monitoring system of the Indian government. 94% of Nigeria's population is exposed to air pollution that the World Health Organization warned as reaching dangerous levels. And lastly, Gaborone, the capital of Botswana, is the 7th most polluted city in the world. Mining. Waste from coal, copper, and gold mines flowing out into the rivers and oceans is destroying marine life, spreading through the bodies of those that have survived with poison. In India, the largest copper mine discharges high levels of toxic heavy metals into water streams. A company from China is producing 12,000 tons of gold per year, causing pollution and safety concerns. As the toxic byproducts of manufacturing processes are being produced much more quickly than the earth can handle. This condition in China has become very critical. Meanwhile, in West Virginia, coal mines have pumped chemical-laden waste water directly into the ground for more than a century, where it can leach into the water table and turn what had been drinkable water into toxic chemical mixture. Climate change. Pollution in West Africa has affected the atmospheric circulation system that controls everything from wind and temperature to rainfall across huge swathes of the region. The Asian monsoon had become the transport of polluted air into stratosphere, and scientists are now linking Pacific storms to the spread of pollution in Asia. Aerosol is tagged the culprit in changing rainfall patterns in Asia and the Atlantic Ocean. These climatic disruptions have similarly caused drought all over Asia and Africa and accelerated the pace of desertification in certain areas. 20 years ago, there were over 50,000 rivers in China. But in 2013, as a result of climate change, uncontrollable urban growth, and rapid industrialization, 28,000 of these rivers had disappeared. Health. An archive article in the journal Scientific American blamed the pollution contributing to more than 500,000 premature deaths each year at the cost of hundreds of billions of dollars. The International Agency for Research on Cancer blamed air pollution for 223,000 lung cancer deaths in 2010. In Indonesia and Malaysia, the link between forest fires and mortality has been well established. The coal mining in West Virginia, which was mentioned earlier, has also made people sick, some with rare cancers, little kids with kidney stones and premature deaths, and children born with congenital disabilities and adults living shorter life expectancies. It was the poor who were most seriously impacted by these environmental issues. This is because of their disadvantage by their low wages and not being able to access good health care, to live in unpolluted areas, and to eat nutritious food. In India, studies on adults' health revealed that 46% in Delhi and 56% in Calcutta have impaired lung function due to air pollution. In China, the toxicity of soil raised concerns over food security and the health of most vulnerable, especially the peasant communities and those living in the factory cities. In 2006, 160 acres of land in China was poisoned by cadmium, and Hong Kong also had this same problem. In Metro Manila, 37%, which is 4 million people of the population, live in slum communities, areas where the effects of urban Environmental problems and threats of climate change are also most pronounced due to their hazardous location, poor air pollution and solid waste management, weak disaster risk management, and limiting coping strategies for of households. Marife Ballesteros concludes that this unhealthy environment deepens poverty, which means this increases the vulnerability of both the poor and non-poor living in slums and excludes the slum poor from growth. One of the major ironies of urban pollution is that the necessities that the poor has access to are also the source of the problem. Mode of transportation. First is the bus. Because it runs mainly on diesel fuel, it is now considered one of the largest contributors to environmental pollution problems worldwide. This problem is expected to worsen as the middle classes and the elites buy more cars and as the road systems are improved to allow more people to travel. The other mode of transportation is the motorbike, also called as the two and three-wheeled vehicles. Motorbikes burn oil and gasoline and emit more smoke, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and particulate matter than newer motorcycles with the gas-only four-stroke engines. And lastly is the increase of diesel-running cars. These vehicles usually command a lower price because of their durability and low operating cost, hence affordable to the middle class. However, they also release 4 times of the toxic pollution as the buses.
So, catching up to our topic, environmental crisis and sustainable development. So consequently, there are a wide range of environmental problems that has emerged, and those problems include climate change, also known as global warming, the depletion of stratospheric ozone or ozone layer, the acidification of surface waters, also known as the acid rain, the destruction of tropical forests, the depletion and extinction of species, and the precipitous decline of biodiversity. Yet, while all of these problems have physical environmental manifestations, their causes and their potential solutions are invariably bound up with human attitudes, beliefs, values, needs, desires, expectations, and behaviors. So these massive environmental problems are difficult to resolve because governments believe that for their countries to become fully developed, they must be industrialized, urbanized, and inhabited by a robust middle class with access to the best of modern amenities. Developed society accordingly must have provisions for the poor, jobs in the industrial sector, public transport system, and cheap food. The model of this ideal modern society is the United States, which until the 1970s was a global economic power with a middle class that was the envy of the world. The United States, however, did not reach this high point without serious environmental consequences. To this very day, it is the worst polluter in the history of the world, responsible for 27% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions. 60% of the carbon emission comes from cars and other vehicles flying American highways and roads, the rest from smoke and soot from coal factories, forest fires, as well as methane. released by farms and breakdown of organic matter, paint, aerosol, and dust. So let me tell you the causes of environmental crisis. The causes of environmental crisis have been the subject for considerable debate. However, in general, its main causes are now acknowledged to be one of the technological developments over the course of human history, and particularly since the Industrial Revolution, which have allowed humans to exert a greater influence over natural resources and ecosystems. Second, the dramatic increases in resource and energy consumption, particularly since the Industrial Revolution and especially since around 1950, which have accompanied economic growth and rising standards of living in some parts of the world, and the emergence and development of the capitalist world economy, in which increasing flows of people, resources, products, energy, and waste have occurred together with increased environmental impacts and utilitarian attitudes towards the environment, which have allowed the unrestricted exploitation of natural resources and ecosystems. Moving on to the next slide. These ecological consequences, however, are far from mind of countries like China, India, and Indonesia, which are now in the midst of frenzied effort to achieve and sustain economic growth to catch up with the West in the desire to develop and improve the standard of living of their citizens. These countries will opt for the goals of economic growth and cheap energy, which in turn would encourage energy overconsumption, waste, and inefficiency, and also fuel environmental pollution. So, because of these ecological consequences, we have a lot of conflict and displacement. Conflict between human societies continues to create severe environmental degradation in addition to human misery and a wide range of social impacts. For instance, the use of depleted uranium munitions causes significant land contamination, whilst the effects of the displacement of large numbers of people from zones of conflict can exert pressures on adjacent ecosystems. And for the fourth slide, these extractive economies, however, are terminal economies. Their resources, which will be eventually depleted, are also sources of pollution. In Nigeria, Niger Delta Oil companies cause substantial land, water, and air pollution. Nigeria is caught in a bind. If it wants to maintain its current economic growth path and sustain its drive for poverty reduction, oil exploration and production will continue to be a dominant economic activity. If the United States lets its environment suffer to achieve modernity and improve the lives of its people, developing countries see no reason, therefore, why they could not sacrifice the environment in the name of progress. So let me tell you something about pollution. This kind of pollution, especially land contamination, occurs as a result of chemical or radioactive pollution, especially by long-lived chemical species that enter the soil. Land contamination may cause profound ecological effects and it presents severe constraints to development, since contaminated land must typically be rehabilitated before it is safe to use for agriculture, construction, or recreation. And of course, the degraded air quality, also known as the air pollution, are also significant, particularly at regional and local scales, as they may also seriously degrade air quality. Worldwide, approximately 1 billion people inhabit areas, mainly industrial cities, where unhealthy levels of air pollution occur. many air pollutants are responsible for the degradation of air quality, but some key pollutants include particulate matter, tropospheric ozone oxides of nitrogen oxides of sulfur, lead, and various aromatic compounds. Many air pollutants may cause or aggravate respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses. Some are known carcinogens, and some can cause damage to vegetation and in turn produce a range of ecological effects. One of the main causes, or rather related issues about environmental crisis, is urbanization. Whereas the issue of urbanization is indirectly related to that of of population growth, since urbanization is occurring in response to increasing population pressures in rural areas and to the increasing concentration of economic opportunities in cities, often in so-called megacities. Urbanization is often associated with a range of social and environmental problems, including overcrowding, congestion, pollution, public health issues, shortage of water for drinking, and inadequate sanitation. Urbanization is also related to another issue, the decline of rural communities. And one of it is the poverty. The poverty, whilst poverty is complex and problematic to define, the persistence of poverty at all levels represents an ongoing challenge as acknowledged in most current development policies, initiatives, and targets. Vast differences in patterns of income production and consumption are evident at all spatial scales, and those patterns are reflected in distinctive patterns of environmental impact. Although in some cases environmental impacts are exported, as in the case of radioactive waste that is generated in one country before being transported to another for processing or disposal. So I think that would be all in catching up to our topic, environmental crisis and its sustainable development. Thank you.
Climate change. Earth's climate caused by humans. Global warming is the result of billions of carbon dioxide coming from coal burning, power plants, and transportation. Various air pollutants and other gases accumulating in the atmosphere. With the current amount of carbon dioxide and other gases, this greenhouse effect has speed up to the rise in the world temperature. So greenhouse. What is the greenhouse effect? Certain gases in the Earth's atmosphere include water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, and others. Allow sunlight to pass through, but then stop to the heat from escaping break out into space much like glass in a greenhouse. Next is where do gases come from? These gases exist naturally in our atmosphere. The most significant increases are in carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide lasts for about 100 years or more. So even if we stop like emission from human activity together, the planet could continue to warm up from the gases already emitted. That's all.
So good morning, sir. Today we're gonna talk about combating global warming. First, let's talk about global warming. So what is global warming? Global warming is a term used for the observed century-scale rise in the average temperature of the Earth's climate system and its related effects. Scientists are more than 95% certain that nearly all of global warming is caused by increasing concentration of greenhouse gases and other human-caused emissions. Within the Earth's atmosphere, accumulating greenhouse gases like water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, Nitrous oxide and ozone are the gases within the atmosphere that absorb and emit heat radiation. Increasing or decreasing amounts of greenhouse gases within the atmosphere act to either hold in or release more of the heat from the sun. So as of today, more countries are now recognizing the perils of global warming. So in 1997, 192 countries signed the Kyoto Protocol to reduce the greenhouse gases. So what is Kyoto Protocol? The Kyoto Protocol is an international treaty which extends the 1992 United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that commits state parties to reduce greenhouse gas emissions based on the scientific consensus that the global warming is occurring and it is extremely likely that human-made that have predominantly caused it. So here are the few countries who signed the Kyoto Protocol. In a 2010 World Bank report thus concluded that the protocol only had a slight impact on reducing global emissions, in part because of the non-binding nature of the agreement. So next is the Paris Accord. The follow-up treaty to the Kyoto Protocol is the Paris Accord, negotiated by 195 countries in December of 2015. It seeks to limit the increase in the global average temperature based on the targeted goals as recommended by scientists. Unlike the Kyoto Protocol, which has predetermined CO2 emissions limits per country, the Paris Accord provides more leeway for countries to decide on their national targets. So here are the few countries who signed the Paris Accord. Social movements, however, have had better success working together with some pressure on their governments to regulate global warming. In South Africa, communities engage in environmental activism to pressure industries to reduce emissions and to lobby parliament for the passage of pro-environment laws. Across the Atlantic in El Salvador, local officials and grassroots organizations from 1,000 communities push for crop diversification, a reduction of industrial sugarcane production, the protection of endangered sea species from the devastating effects of commercial fishing, and the preservation of lowlands being eroded by deforestations up in the rivers of inconsistent release of water from nearby dams. When these local alliances between the state, schools, and communities are replicated at the national level, the success becomes doubly significant. In Japan, population pressure forced the government to work with the civil society groups, academia, and political parties to get the parliament to pass a blizzard of laws. 14 passed at once in what became known as the Pollution Diet of 1970. These regulations did not eliminate environmental problems, but today, Japan has some of the least polluted cities in the world. The imperative now is for everyone to set up these kinds of coalitions in global scale. For at this point, when governments still hesitate in fully committing themselves to fight pollution, and when international organizations still lack the power to enforce anti-pollution policies, social coalitions that bring in village associations, academics, the media, and local governments, and even international agencies together may be the only way to reverse the worsening situation. So in conclusion, perhaps there are no issue forces people to think about their role as citizens of the world than environmental degradation. Every person, regardless of his or her race, nation, or creed, belongs to the same world. When one looks at an image of the earth, he or she will realize that he belongs to one world, a world that is increasingly vulnerable. In the fight against climate change, no one can afford to simply care about his or her own backyard. The pollution emitted in one country may have severe effects on the climate of another. There is no choice but to find global solutions to this global problem. And that's all. Thanks for watching.